If you are over 60 years old, this might be the most critical health warning you hear all year. And you need to hear it clearly. For decades, we have been told a simple rule that lower blood pressure is always better, and that everyone should aim for 120/80. But that rule can mislead seniors. But brand new research is uncovering a shocking truth that most seniors are never told. The strict guideline is not always safe for you. The strict guidelines designed for a 40-year-old could actually be dangerous and in some cases deadly for someone over 70. We see this tragic scenario play out constantly in emergency rooms, and it is preventable. An older adult works hard to get their numbers down to that perfect textbook level. On paper, they look like the picture of health, but in reality, they feel exhausted, weak, and mentally foggy. That is a red flag. They stand up from a chair and the room spins. That is not just aging. They think this is just normal aging, but it is not. These are warning signs that their brain is being starved of oxygen because their blood pressure has been pushed too low for their aging body. Consider a story that is all too common. And listen closely. A 78-year-old individual was prescribed aggressive medication to force their blood pressure down. When they finally hit 118/72, the medical chart looked perfect, but their quality of life was destroyed. They became unstable on their feet. One morning, they stood up, blacked out due to a sudden pressure drop, and suffered a hip fracture. The very treatment intended to protect their heart ended up robbing them of their independence. That is the danger. The problem was not that their pressure was too high. The problem was that the perfect number for a younger person was actually a hazard for them. And this happens every day. You need to understand the mechanics of why this happens. I will explain it simply. As you age, your arteries naturally stiffen and become less flexible. Your heart actually requires a slightly higher pressure to push blood through those stiff vessels and fight gravity to get oxygen up to your brain. That is the key point. If you suppress that pressure too aggressively, you risk kidney failure, dementia, and life-changing falls. This is why lower is not always safer. There is a specific sweet spot for blood pressure that research now links to the longest survival and best brain function for seniors, and I guarantee it is higher than you think. I am going to reveal exactly what that target range is for your specific age group. But first, we need to look at the silent symptoms you might be ignoring, because those symptoms matter. If you are ready to learn the truth that could save your brain and your independence, please type the number 1 in the comments below right now. Let's start this conversation together. Before we reveal that specific target number for your age group, you have to understand the mechanics of why the old rules are failing you. Think of your cardiovascular system like the plumbing in an old house. As you age, your arteries naturally stiffen and lose their elasticity. This is a normal biological process. Because those vessels are stiffer, your heart actually has to generate a slightly higher pressure to push the blood through them, and most importantly, to fight gravity and pump blood all the way up to your brain. That last part is critical. When we aggressively force an older adult's blood pressure down to 120/80, we are often removing the pressure necessary to perfuse the brain. We saw a case recently involving a 77-year-old man who had been medicated down to a perfect 118/72. On paper, he was a success story. In reality, he was living in a fog. He couldn't finish sentences, he had trouble with balance, and his family feared he was developing early dementia. But it wasn't dementia. It was overtreatment. When his medication was adjusted and his systolic pressure was allowed to rise to 138, the change was almost miraculous. Within 2 weeks, the brain fog lifted, his energy returned, and his memory sharpened. His brain was finally getting the fuel it needed. That is what enough pressure can do. This aligns with shocking new data published in major medical journals like the European Heart Journal. The pattern is clear. The research indicates that for adults over 75, the sweet spot for longevity and brain health is not 120. It is actually between 130 and 140 systolic. That range matters. For those over 80 or anyone dealing with frailty, pushing that number even slightly higher up to 150 can actually be protective against falls and kidney failure. In the right person, the goal is to treat the person, not the number. We want you to have enough pressure to stand up without the room spinning, but not so high that it risks a stroke. That is the balance. It is a delicate balance that changes as you age, and we adjust it with you. However, there is a hidden test you must do at home to ensure you are safe, because a single reading at the doctor's office might be hiding a dangerous drop. That happens only when you stand up. We call this the silent drop, and catching it could prevent a life-changing fracture. That is why this test matters. If you are finding this information helpful and want to know exactly how to perform this safety test at home, please type the number 2 in the comments below right now. Let's keep going together. Here is exactly how to perform the safety test that most seniors are never taught, yet it could literally save you from a life-changing fall. You need to simulate what happens in your daily life, not just what happens in a quiet doctor's office. That difference can be decisive. Start by lying down for 5 minutes to let your body settle. Measure your blood pressure, then stand up and measure it again immediately while you remain standing. Don't sit back down. If your top number drops by more than 20 points or your bottom number drops by more than 10 points, you have what we call orthostatic hypotension. This means your internal sensors are reacting too slowly to gravity. And that delay can be dangerous. We often see cases where a person looks perfect on paper with a reading of 124/78 while sitting. But the moment they stand, that number crashes to 98/60. This hidden drop is the primary reason so many older adults experience unexplained dizziness, weakness, or that terrifying feeling that the room is spinning. That is a warning sign, but the danger goes beyond just falling. When your pressure plummets like this, your brain is momentarily starved of oxygen. Over time, this chronic lack of blood flow doesn't just make you feel woozy. It can mimic the signs of dementia. That is the trap. We see seniors who are misdiagnosed with cognitive decline when, in reality, they are simply over-medicated. Their brain is functioning in a constant state of low fuel, and that can be reversed. Think about the implications of this. If you are taking medication to force your sitting blood pressure down to a strict 120, you might be pushing your standing blood pressure into a danger zone that risks a hip fracture. A broken hip in your 80s is not just an injury. It is often the beginning of a rapid decline that ends in a nursing home. That is the reality. This is why we say that for seniors, the definition of a healthy blood pressure must prioritize stability and brain function over an arbitrary number on a chart. Every single time. So, if the old rule of 120/80 is potentially causing these dangerous drops, what is the new target you should be discussing with your doctor? Here is what matters now. The latest research from major medical journals has finally identified a specific range that protects your heart without sacrificing your brain or your balance. That is the goal. If you are ready to hear the exact numbers that research suggests are safest for your age group, type "ready" in the comments below, and let's get to the solution. Based on groundbreaking new data published in major medical journals like JAMA and the European Heart Journal, the target numbers for older adults have officially shifted. The goal is no longer to drive your pressure as low as possible. The goal is to find the specific range where your risk of stroke is low but your brain protection is high. That is the trade-off. We call this the longevity sweet spot, and it varies significantly depending on which decade of life you are in. So, we tailor it to your age. For independent adults between the ages of 65 and 75 who are generally healthy, the data suggests a systolic target, that's the top number, between 130 and 140 is ideal. That is the sweet spot for this decade. At this level, you maintain strong protection against cardiovascular events, but you avoid the dizziness and fatigue associated with aggressive overtreatment. Stable, protected, functional. If you are currently sitting at 120 and feeling great, that is fine. But if you are forcing it down to 120 and feeling weak, research shows you are likely safer, allowing it to rise slightly toward 135. That is a safer adjustment. As we move to the 75 to 85 age bracket, the target shifts upward to account for naturally stiffer arteries. This is normal physiology. The research indicates that a systolic pressure between 135 and 145 is actually associated with the lowest mortality rates and the best cognitive function. That is the brain-safe range. This is the range where the brain gets adequate fuel without being overwhelmed. In this age group, pushing pressure below 125 has been linked to worse outcomes, including kidney injury and a higher risk of dementia. That is not a risk worth taking. For those over 85 or anyone dealing with frailty or balance issues, the priority changes from preventing long-term issues to preventing immediate catastrophic falls. Safety comes first. Here, a systolic pressure of 140 to 150 is often considered acceptable and protective. At this stage of life, a slightly higher pressure acts as a safety buffer, ensuring that when you stand up, your brain does not lose oxygen. However, we cannot ignore the bottom number, the diastolic pressure. This is often the forgotten danger zone. You must ensure your diastolic pressure does not drop below 60, not below 60. Your heart muscle receives its own blood supply when it relaxes between beats. If that bottom number falls into the 50s, your heart itself may not be getting enough oxygen, which can lead to silent damage over time, and you will not feel it until it is serious. Now that you know these age-appropriate ranges, you might be realizing your current medication regimen is too aggressive. That is a common discovery. But before you make any changes, you need to know the correct protocol for discussing this with your doctor, because simply demanding less medication can backfire if not done correctly. Here is the exact blueprint for having this life-saving conversation with your doctor. And the way you say it matters. Do not simply walk into the clinic and demand to stop your medication. That will only create resistance. Instead, you need to change the conversation from an opinion to a medical necessity by using data. Data lowers emotion and raises clarity. Bring a written log of your blood pressure readings taken at home over 2 weeks, specifically noting the times you felt dizzy or weak. Those notes are the signal. When you sit down with your physician, use this specific phrase, "I would like a medication review." Simple, professional, clear. Explain that you are concerned your current dosage might be too aggressive for your age and that you are experiencing symptoms of low perfusion such as brain fog or instability when standing. That framing is medical. This approach works because you are not just complaining, you are providing clinical evidence. Evidence changes decisions. A dose that was perfect for you at age 55 is often toxic at age 75, because your liver and kidneys clear drugs more slowly. That is biology, not failure. We often see that simply reducing a dose, rather than eliminating it, clears up the mental confusion and restores energy levels within days. That is the outcome we want. Furthermore, look at your hydration. This is the most overlooked factor in senior blood pressure management. As you age, your thirst mechanism fades, and if you are taking a diuretic or water pill, you are likely chronically dehydrated. Most people never connect the dots. This reduces your blood volume and makes your pressure crash when you stand up. Sometimes, the solution is not just less medication, but simply adding 2 glasses of water to your daily routine. Small change, big impact. Let's summarize the most vital lesson from this entire series. The definition of a healthy blood pressure has changed. Your goal is no longer to chase a perfect number on a machine to impress a doctor. Your goal is to preserve your independence. That is the priority. A slightly higher blood pressure that ensures your brain gets oxygen and keeps you safe from a hip fracture is infinitely superior to a perfect low number that leaves you weak, confused, and at risk of falling. That is the truth. Treat the person, not the number. Listen to your body. If you feel dizzy, speak up. If you feel foggy, check your numbers. You have the right to ask questions, and you have the right to feel good. Never forget that. If this series has given you a new perspective on your health, please like this video and share it with a friend who needs to hear this truth. Stay safe, stay steady, and prioritize your quality of life, always.